I lap danced on our intern at the work party. He watched, then left me in front of everyone. Hello, Reddits. My name is Doris, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a secretary to the younger director in the company. For privacy's sake, I would like to keep all the names private and confidential, so I will only be using fake names. I'm here because I need your help, guys. My boyfriend, whom we've been together for 6 years now, has ended things with me, and not just ended things, but ensured he destroyed everything I've worked so hard for. I didn't do it to upset him, and I was really tipsy that night when I kept begging Chris to dance with me, and he refused, so I found someone else. And when I did find someone else to dance with, I had done something really stupid. I lap danced on our intern, who was barely 3 months into the job at the work party, and Chris sat there. He watched, and then left me in front of everyone. Chris and I have been together right from university during our sophomore years, and we were literally gummed at the hips together. We did everything together, and he was my first kiss, and also the first guy I ever had sex with because of the fact that I grew up with conservative parents who were really strict with the upbringings of my siblings and I. Although my parents liked Chris when they eventually met him and didn't mind that we even lived and worked together, and Chris and I studied the same course, and when we got out of school, we applied to the same company, although for different roles. The young director I mentioned earlier that I work with is actually Chris, and within the space of 2 years of working there, Chris was well known and had been promoted thrice. I was also promoted too, but just once, and it was to work with Chris as his secretary. I found out that he had been the one to push my promotion, and I didn't mind that so long I got a better pay and a better office location. Working with Chris was surprisingly draining, and he was a totally different person at work and at home. People, especially the ones we worked with, were so shocked when they found out about our relationship, and Chris never tolerated a mistake, and he had the eyes for those things. He was also really strict and pushed hard, and I would have to print documents over and over again if there were any mistakes found there. He pissed me off a lot of times, but he definitely made up for it at home and would book me spa treatments on weekends, buy me gifts whenever he had to travel for work, and he would sometimes take me out on dates and let me badmouth my overdriven boss, even though it was him. Don't get me wrong, Chris pushing me hard did make me better, and within a year of working as his secretary, I really got the hang of things perfectly, and I hardly made any mistakes. He was just the perfect partner, and my friends envied our relationship because of how easily we tailored, or more correctly, Chris had tailored our lives to have this easy routine. We understood what we were supposed to do when we needed to, and why, and we were the perfect power work couple, and everyone even at work envied us. Things were really perfect between us, and we were truly happy for those 6 years, just until I met him. Peter, our new intern at work. We barely got any new workers at work because of how strict the hiring at our company is, so most people tried entering through internship training, which is always for 3 months, but most of them ended up not being retained. But Peter, he was different, and he came in through his uncle, who worked at the company as one of the high hierarchies. He was apparently just put in as an intern, and then would possibly be retained after a couple of months under his uncle's influence. We all knew that. We knew that he was going to stay at work, and everyone wasn't exactly too happy with the power trip on display. We had other interns too, but Peter had the necessary backing even if he didn't work. But despite the hate he was clearly receiving at the office because of his uncle's influence, Peter wasn't moved by it, and he could easily do nothing and still get to retain a job at the company, but he worked even harder than the others ever did. I admired him a lot for that, and since he most times had to work directly under me, I was quite impressed by his resilience. He spoke very little, and he wasn't even like me at all from the beginning, and he made several mistakes before I got the hang of things. So I started to put him through a lot of things, teaching him things about the company that generally an intern shouldn't know because of how bright he is, and at the beginning I was always speaking about him to Chris. It was our usual after-work everyday thing, and we spoke about our day and told each other new things we noticed. I told Chris about how easy it was to relate with Peter because of how good he was, and Chris agreed with me. He didn't have any work directly with Peter, so I was usually the only one in contact with him, and Chris never said anything, and I continued each day to speak about Peter. How good he was, how much he made my job easy, and how he was always getting me coffee the exact way that I liked it. But I stopped once Chris had jokingly said that I was beginning to sound like Peter was my boyfriend and not him, and I knew that it was the truth because of how often I spoke about Peter. So I stopped mentioning him in conversations, and I minimized the appreciation and admiration in my tone when I had to mention him when Chris asked. But something entirely different, something that wasn't work, had happened between Peter and I one evening at work, and that had been the turnaround in our relationship. Before that evening, I noticed that Peter was extra attentive to me and was noticing my new haircut or a new dress and complimenting me before anyone else did notice or never did. He would offer to take me to lunch every lunch break, and even though I refused every single time, he never stopped offering. My coffee, too. He would never tell me where he usually got it, so I could get it on my own instead of depending on him to do so for me every morning because of how good the coffee is. And there were the long, lingering stares while we worked together, and the little remarks about how beautiful he thought I was. I tried not to mind all that. Regardless of his uncle's position, he was still my junior at work, and I couldn't afford any scandal with him, particularly because everyone at work knew that Chris and I were a couple, so I didn't want to jeopardize my relationship, and also give the chance for rumors to spread. But it was hard not to notice the way he behaved around me, making me feel all giddy and girly on the inside. But I still was about to ignore it, but that wasn't for very long. Chris was gone for a whole month for a project that required his attention, and I was disheartened by it, but it was work, so he had no choice. We spoke every evening on the phone and always updated each other on the recent happenings in our lives, but being in the house was quite lonely without Chris, so I threw myself into work, taking on more work than was required, so I could just go to bed when I get home and sleep because I was tired instead of wandering around the house with nothing to do. But taking on more work meant spending more time at the office and inevitably more time with Peter, who was always there until it was very late and I had to leave. He would bring us dinner or snacks while we worked, and it was nice, and it was really about work for both of us. Well, at least for me for the first week. But things had changed dramatically between us the second week of working closely together, and it had been one of those nights when you just felt overwhelmed by everything. You just wanted to pour out your mind to someone who was available and ready to listen to you, and Peter had been that person. Chris had become too busy with the project, and he was hardly calling anymore, and he was either too tired and had slept off, or when he did call, he slept off during the calls. I understood the pressure he was under, particularly from the higher tops, and that he was working himself to the bone, but I just felt angry for some reason. I wanted his attention, and I sucked because I couldn't get it. And that evening I had tried Chris's number for the untempt time, but he wasn't picking up, so I was really pissed, and Peter had noticed. Of course he had. He was right beside me when I kept trying Chris's number and hissing rather loudly. He asked me what was wrong, and instead of shutting up about it, I told him exactly how I was feeling, and Peter comforted me then. There was nothing unusual about what he did, and he just touched my shoulder and rubbed it in silent comfort while I spoke angrily. There was nothing romantic about the whole situation, really, but for some reason, when Peter had reached out and kissed me hesitant at first, as if he was testing waters, I didn't do all of the things you would have expected that I'll do. Push him away, slap him hard across the face, or even remind him who exactly I was to him. But I had done nothing like that. Instead, I had closed my eyes and allowed him to kiss me, and Peter, who got bowled by my lack of resistance, had continued, and this time proceeded from start to the end. Yes, I ended up having sex with Peter in the office on the uncomfortable sofa, and I know how bad that sounds, but hear me out completely before you judge me. It was almost like I had no control over what was happening, and I just let it happen. I let him kiss me in places where only Chris had ever had to, and I let him take off all my dress and underwear, and I let him touch me. I even let him persuade me into helping him with his own clothes, and there was no rushing, and there was no one else in the building except the security guards, and they knew we always worked until late, so they never disturb us. When we were done, though, I was slammed by guilt, and I felt ashamed of myself. I had not only just cheated on my relationship that was more than 5 years, but I had done so with a junior colleague at work. I couldn't even speak to Chris, and so when he called that night, I let the phone ring until it stopped because of how guilty I felt. But Peter didn't share my feelings of guilt, though, and he was bouncy and all happy the next morning. He even winked at me when he came into my office to drop off a file I had specifically asked someone else to bring. I knew I had to end whatever was between Peter and I without blowing the whistle, and I didn't want him to be angry and tell everyone, especially Chris, about what had transpired between us. So I invited him to lunch 2 days after the first time we slept together, and I told him the usual stuff. I even wrote out the speech and practiced it on the way there, but as I said it, I felt how insincere I sounded. I didn't want the thing between Peter and I to end, and I wanted to sleep with him again. I also didn't want Chris to know, and I wanted both things. Call me greedy, but that was what I realized at that moment. But as I said the words, Peter had been upset, but agreed with me, and he started ignoring me at work completely. He only came to me when I needed him, and spent any extra time outside the necessary time. He also stopped my coffee, and I became really desperate, and I wanted Peter. And this time, I knew I had to make the first step. And my opportunity came when we had to work outside town for a day, and I had chosen Peter to go with me. We were done with the job within the afternoon and could have headed back, but I insisted on staying and enjoying ourselves. I gave excuses of not wasting the already booked and paid hotel room that had been set aside for us to sleep in, and Peter agreed with me. He chose the room opposite mine, and we each went into our rooms individually. But minutes later, I had gone to knock on Peter's door with a flimsy excuse that I cannot even remember right now. He allowed me in his room, knowing obviously what I wanted, because immediately I stepped in, he just dragged me to himself and started to kiss me. We spent the whole night together, and this time, I didn't even feel barged with guilt as I had the first time we slept together. We started meeting secretly after that day, just to have sex, and we had no expectations from each other. He knew I was in a relationship, and that I didn't want any other commitments, and he was cool with it. We had a consensual relationship, and it was a perfect arrangement for a while. Well, just until Chris had come home and it became more difficult to see Peter, because I couldn't just leave the house without having given some excuses or lies about where I was going. Peter was starting to get impatient, particularly when I made an appointment for us to meet, and then I ended up bailing out on him because I didn't want Chris suspecting me. But eventually we got a better arrangement, and our lunch break was spent exploring, not places this time, but our bodies. We found nearby hotels, or went to Peter's place just to have sex, and it became something I couldn't do without, something I couldn't stop, or at least I felt like that in those moments. I knew that what I was doing was bad, but I just don't know what I thought it all was really, or what the consequences of my action would be, and those consequences came even faster than I prepared for that horrible day. Our company decided to host an event for the workers, a party to celebrate the success of the project Chris had had to travel for a whole month to execute. It had yielded massively, and the company decided to celebrate. The party was a 1+1 party, and of course Chris was meant to be my date. He actually was my date, but that particular evening, Chris wasn't really the regular Chris that I had always known. I should have known that something was really up with him, and the way he was behaving for 2 days before the party had been quite alarming. He was always so quiet, withdrawn even, and he wouldn't speak to me, and just ignored me all day. Whenever I did talk to him, he would not even respond to me and would keep mute or just walk away. I thought it was because something was bothering him, but I never asked. Between trying to shop for the dress I was wearing for the party and trying to keep my affair with Peter very private, I had a lot on my hands, and so I completely and stupidly ignored Chris's behavior and focused on what I thought as important. The party day came and we finally got to dress up and loosen up. I was excited, but Chris was in that mood again, so I just ignored him and dressed up. He waited for me to dress up before driving both of us to the party. But as soon as we walked into the party, instead of enjoying ourselves, Chris had withdrawn himself and stood with some men, some potential investors, from the way they talked. Chris never wasted time with things like that, always convincing the people that needed convincing so he could get whatever he wanted from them. I was pissed, and I sat down beside him and watched him talk with those men. I couldn't complain because I knew it was important and it was work. So I just sat there and chunked down drinks until I was very lighthearted. I saw Peter watching me from where he sat with the others, but I ignored him, pretending not to be aware he was watching me. Eventually, I was so bored and I decided to dance. Nobody was, and the party was getting more boring by the minute. I tried dragging Chris to his feet so he could dance with me, but he refused even after I begged him several times. So I just staggered to where Peter sat and asked him to dance with me, ignoring the look of surprise on the faces of the others. Peter didn't say no, just took my hand and took me to the stage where we started dancing really crazily. Everybody else gathered around us, watching us twirl, turn, and twist in different ways just to showcase our dance moves. And then a song came on. My favorite slow song, the song I was always dancing to whenever I wanted to seduce Chris at the house, or even when we made love. It was Jam, and I loved it. When it came on, without thinking about the consequences, I just pushed Peter back into a chair and I straddled him, and then I gave him a lap dance. People were whistling, clapping, and encouraging me, so I continued and did it until the music stopped and changed into something with a fast beat. I didn't even look at Chris all these while, and I just danced and laughed happily, too tipsy to understand the full consequences. But it started to dawn on me when the party ended around midnight, and everyone had stepped out of the venue to get a cab, especially because everyone had drank and they couldn't drive. Chris, though, was perfectly fine. He hadn't touched a single drink, and that was because he drove there, and also Chris never really drank. So when he collected his keys from the valet and stepped into his car, I expected that we would of course go home together. But Chris had just looked at me with that blank expression on his face again, and he zoomed off, leaving me at the party. I was shocked and couldn't understand what was going on, and I felt really embarrassed because everybody was looking at me, probably wondering the same thing that I was. I was pissed, and when I did get home, Chris wouldn't open the door. I didn't bring my keys because we had gone out together, and I knew Chris would definitely take his keys. I tried knocking several times, but Chris still wouldn't open up. Eventually, I ended up sleeping at a motel close by, just so I could stop creating a nuisance outside the house, hoping that I could come home the next day and talk to Chris. But the next morning, I woke up to shocking news. My mom had called first. She was so angry. She spoke to me rather rudely, telling me she never wanted to set her eyes on me again, and I should never come home. I was surprised and shocked, and my mother had always been a gentle woman and never yelled at me before. But while I was still pondering on what to do, I got another call, this time a call from work that I was placed on probation and shouldn't show up at work that Monday until further notice. I still was really confused and everything was happening all at once. My life was crumbling and I didn't know what to do and how to do it. Soon, I got a text from one of my friends, and she sent me a particular link and asked me if it was true. When I clicked the link, I almost threw my phone away. It was Chris's Instagram page, and he posted something horrible. Pictures of me and Peter entering and leaving a hotel. Another picture of him kissing me right outside his house. There were also screenshots of our messages to each other there, when we would send each other the location we needed to meet at. There was no doubt whatsoever that Peter and I were lovers, and Chris had tagged the post, "Girlfriend of 6 years cheats with an intern at work." I cannot even begin to talk about the number of hates and wicked comments I've received since on that particular post. My social media is flooded with people who I never knew, and those I knew tagging me and saying different horrible things about me. Eventually, I had to stay off social media and switch off my phone to stop the calls and the insults. I borrowed the receptionist's phone to call Chris, and he picked up the second ring, but immediately he heard my voice. He disconnected the call. When I tried again, he wouldn't pick the call. I went back to the house, knowing he would be back by that particular time from work, but Chris just drove past me to park his car in the garage, and then he proceeded to ignore me, and just went into the house and locked me outside. I begged and begged for him to open the door and listen to me, but Chris wouldn't answer me, and it was then I just knew that I was doomed. I cried hard when I got back to the motel room, and I was too scared to switch on my phone because of the overwhelming insults I was receiving. But I finally summoned the courage to do that, and if I thought the morning was worse, then I was only playing around. More people and more insults, ones I've never heard before in my life, just kept coming in. My friends were blocking me, including the one that sent me the link to view the post, and they were all staying away. Even Alice, my friend from university days, was not responding to me, and I had no one to talk to, and I was just so frustrated. I didn't think Chris would ever find out about my affair, or that he would have taken his revenge this far. I've thought a lot about it for these past 2 weeks, and wondered exactly how he found out, but I've not been able to come up with an answer. I thought I was careful and that I covered my tracks well, but apparently I never did because Chris was able to get all of that information, even though I thought I was safe. Peter got fired almost immediately, and the company of course didn't want anything tarnishing their image, so they had fired Peter. He called me sobbing like a child and blaming me for everything, and I was just so angry because I had it more rough than he does, and yet he blamed me for sleeping with him. He was the one who started the whole seduction, but then I blame myself too. I was stupid enough to fall into it too, and also continue until now. It's not only ruining my relationship, but my entire life. I've left thousands of messages on Chris's phone by now, but none of them got a reply. He reads them, I know, but he never just replies, and I know he's doing that to punish me even more for what I had done. Guys, please, I do not mind losing my job or my friends over this, but I cannot lose Chris too. He's the only stable person I have in my life, and I don't know how to exist without him in the picture. I don't know how to live without him, and we've been together for 6 years already. I don't want our relationship to just end. I know I caused all these, and I regret everything so much, and I'm willing, desperate even, to make amends. Please, guys, you have to help me. What should I do? Update. Hello, Reddits. It's been a month already. A month had passed since Chris found out about Peter and had decided to gather more than enough evidence and destroy my life with it by posting it online. My life has taken a whole lot of hits since then, from everywhere and everyone, and I've been tagged a witch and a slut so many times, it's starting to feel like that's what I am. I've been called greedy and selfish, and I've been called a delusional person because of my desperate attempts to get back with Chris. I've been regarded as a worthless person and told to disappear, and I've lost friends and family. They no longer even speak to me no matter how hard I try to get them to, and they all want nothing to do with someone like me who had easily destroyed her relationship of 6 years. A relationship that was envied, and that had no blemish that couldn't be managed properly because Chris made it so. A relationship that would have probably already have become a marriage if I hadn't been so stupid and hasty to destroy it. I saw it that day, the day Chris had sent me a short text after all of the thousands of texts I had already sent him. He told me to come pick my things or he would throw them away, and after locking me out of the house for several days already, he left the house open for me that day. But he made himself absent, and his sister, who hates me very much right now, was the one indoors, and she ensured I took everything that belonged to me outside her brother's house. When I was removing my clothes from the wardrobe we shared, a box fell out, and when I opened it, I saw a ring. The exact ring I had told Chris I wanted to be proposed to when he did propose, and I didn't even think he'd remember. It was years ago when I saw the ring on the shelf, when we had gone into a jewelry shop to fix my necklace, and I had seen it, and I told Chris that I wanted that exact ring. I never even suspected that Chris had marriage in mind, or had been planning on proposing to me. He had been coded about it, and I was sure that ring was placed there to add more to my emotional stress. The ring hadn't been there before then, and I knew because I also used the wardrobe every morning and evening before and after work, and I hadn't noticed the ring there before. Which meant Chris had kept it somewhere else before that day, but he must have purposely dropped the ring there that day to show me exactly what it was I missed, because I thought it wise to cheat. And honestly, seeing that ring had done exactly what Chris wanted it to do. I cried hard staring at the ring. I must have been there for longer than necessary because Chris's sister started yelling at me to hurry and get out, and I left that day knowing that I would never get Chris back. Not now or ever. Your comments too were another eye-opener, and the cruelty you guys have managed to put in just a few words has created another sort of mental damage. You guys made me feel stupid for coming here thinking I could get some sort of solution for my problem, and you've left really mind-disturbing comments under my post. It's even more painful seeing your comments, knowing that I explained everything here, how everything had turned out the way it did, and why. What I felt at that moment and why I did what I did. I thought if I explained, that someone would understand me and perhaps give me some sort of advice or encouragement, something that would get me back together with Chris. But I had gotten the exact opposite, and not a single one of you had seen the regrets I had. None of you had understood just how hard it had been forever since Chris made that post online, and nobody cares that I've been stigmatized and abandoned by everyone because of what I did. None of you care that I put myself out there totally risking everything, especially my mental health, by coming here to say everything, including the part I played in ruining my life. You guys make me regret ever coming here in the first place, and I don't know how it's possible to have new and more painful regrets, but I found out with you guys. And I cannot exactly fault you guys. It's all my fault. I did this to myself, and I must bear the consequences of my actions. I must face it head on, but that's just what I tell myself. It's different in my head, and I feel like I'm at sea, and I'm drowning so fast with no help, or no way to come up to the surface for air. I've had nothing else to do these days but to beat myself up mentally for ruining the perfect relationship I had. Chris had never given me any reasons to doubt his love and affection, and even his faithfulness towards me. He never made me feel that I had to do anything in desperate attempts to catch his attention, and he was everything a woman could wish for in a partner. I got that perfect partner, and yet my imperfections reared its head just a little bit, and I managed to ruin the good thing I had. I've been fired from my job, and it was either fire me or lose Chris. Of course, the company wouldn't be able to bear the loss of losing someone as efficient and as brilliant as Chris, and a secretary could always be replaced. In fact, to prove that, I was replaced within a week after I was fired. I've made myself a replaceable person with just one stupid decision. The coward I even made that decision for is now nowhere to be found. Apparently, he had caused an issue at his former place of work and was almost sued. His uncle had rescued him and given him a chance at the company, and yet again, he had caused the same issue. I feel so stupid for allowing things to get this way, because I could have avoided all of these. I wouldn't have ended this way if I wasn't really just selfish and greedy. Peter wasn't exactly good in bed, he wasn't rich, and he certainly wasn't someone I was in love with, but my greedy self wanted both relationships. Sleeping with two men and thinking I could get away with it had been thrilling at that point, but the end result definitely isn't. I've not only become a castaway because of my actions, but also a lonely woman, and I'm losing my mind more and more each day because of the fact that I'm alone. I've had nothing else to do but to think daily, ponder on the things I could have done differently, the decisions I could have taken to avoid all of these. I could have chosen peace, I know that, but I ended up choosing the exact opposite, and I really feel so disturbed by it. I regret losing Chris, and I miss him so much. I miss everything about him. The silent encouragement he gives me, the way he had helped me build myself into a confident and proud woman, the way he had designed our life to be both easy and doable, the way he speaks, and I remember I would laugh when he tried to say anything into my ears because of his beards, the way he made boring jokes that only got funny because of the look of puzzlement on his face that nobody was laughing, the way he always picked out his vegetables like a child because he hated them. All his admirable qualities make it even more hard to move on from this, because I know I lost a great man because I was stupid. I feel so pained knowing that I could never get Chris back, and that I will never be that woman in his life, knowing that he will move on and meet someone new, someone who is entirely different from me. Perhaps someone he didn't need to work on as much as he had done on me, a woman who knows what she's doing, and perhaps a perfect match for him because of how brilliant she is too. Someone who would never have done what I did because they know exactly what losing a person like Chris would be like. Someone who would love him and cherish him the way he deserves to be cherished. Those thoughts float through my mind all day, and it's so painful thinking about it. I think back to that party, and I almost wish I could just go back and undo the rubbish I had done, knowing now that Chris knew then that I wasn't just dancing harmlessly with another man, but was sleeping with him too. Knowing that I danced that easily with him because he already knew me intimately, which was why I was comfortable enough to sit on his lap and dance like some sex worker who would get paid at the end of the night. He must have watched me display so publicly my affair, and must have felt so much anger and disgust. I wish someone would just point me in the direction of a time machine when I could go back and just undo everything. Funnily, it's my birthday today, although it's not at all a happy one because I'm not celebrating with anyone. No one even remembers because I haven't got not even one call since the day started, and it's about to end now. No gifts, no kisses and prayers on the morning of my birthday, and no birthday dinner in the evening after work. I wonder now if that ring had been saved for my birthday. Maybe I would be getting proposed to this evening, and I would be screaming my eyes off the roof of whatever restaurant we're at. But I guess I will never find out now. I've ruined everything, and every chance too to amend what I broke. Not everyone gets second chances, and I guess I did get a second chance to stop my stupidity after the first time I slept with Peter, but I never did. So I've lost all my chances in the world to make things right, and words will never fully comprehend just how horrible that makes me feel. This hell I've created for myself is so much worse than anything on earth, and knowing I will be stuck in it forever makes it even more dreadful. I don't know how to survive all of these on my own, and all I'm definitely sure of is that it's going to be one hell of a painful ride for life. This is my last post here, and I sure hope that you guys, regardless of how much hate you have for me, you learned a bit, even if it's just a little bit about the ends of cheaters. Thanks and goodbye.